Sit back, relax and enjoy listening. RK knelt nearby, feeling helpless as he watched SV clutch herself tightly, her face buried in her knees, her arms wrapped around her legs like a shield. Her whole body was tense, locked away from him, as if hiding from the world itself. Each quiet sob echoed through the room, raw and painful, piercing the silence. She looked so small, so distant, lost in a darkness he couldn't reach. The woman he had always known as powerful, unbreakable, untouchable, and fearless was now curled up before him, fragile and vulnerable. He remained where he was, frozen, unable to comprehend what could have brought her to this point. SV, he called softly, his voice a gentle whisper. I'm here, SV. Please, open your eyes. It's just us, just me. He waited, hoping his words might break through to her. But there was no response. Her fingers dug tighter into her arms, her body trembling, unwilling to release herself from the protective cocoon she'd created. RK took a slow breath, holding himself steady. He wanted so badly to reach out, to hold her, to pull her from whatever invisible pain was tearing her apart. But each time he tried to come closer, he saw the way her body recoiled, as if his approach only tightened her defenses. So he stayed a short distance away, his voice gentle, soothing, hoping it would bridge the gap. SV, please look at me, he said softly, a plea in his voice. It's just me, and no one else is here. Still, she hugged her legs even tighter, her face completely hidden, her body a closed-off wall. His words seemed to fall into a void, unable to break through the fear and pain that had swallowed her whole. RK felt his heart ache, watching her like this, each sob a fresh wound he couldn't ignore. He spoke again, quieter this time. You don't have to stay like this. Just hold my hand, please. Let's go home. He extended his hand towards her. There was still nothing, just her silent tears and her fragile form, shaking with quiet cries, slipping away from him despite his presence. Finally, RK couldn't hold back any longer. He couldn't stand the thought of her being alone in this moment, unable to feel the comfort he was aching to give. Slowly he moved forward, his arms reaching out to lift her gently. Her body flinched, trying weakly to pull away, but her strength was gone. She had no fight left, no energy to resist as he held her close. It's okay, he whispered as he lifted her carefully. Her face was still hidden, her arms locked around her legs, but she didn't pull away further. She had no strength left to resist. He held her close, cradling her as they moved toward the door, her body fragile and limp in his arms. The night air was cool as he carried her to his car, each step slow and careful, as if any jolt might break her more. She was barely aware of her surroundings, her eyes shut tight. RK carried her to the car, his steps careful, his voice a quiet, steady promise. You're safe with me, nothing will happen to you. I'm here. Each word was an assurance, a vow that he wouldn't let go, not for a second. Instead of placing her in the passenger seat, RK gently slid into the driver's seat with her still in his arms. Holding her close, he knew putting her in the other seat wasn't an option. He wanted her near, to feel the steady beat of his heart as they drove through the quiet, empty night. Settling her in his lap, he wrapped one arm around her protectively, his other hand on the steering wheel. As he drove, his gaze flicked between the road and the fragile figure nestled against him. Every few minutes he whispered softly, It's okay, you're safe. I'm here. Nothing will happen to you, I promise. She didn't respond, her face still hidden, her body trembling slightly. But gradually, he felt a faint shift, a hint that maybe, just maybe, his presence was reaching her. When they arrived home, RK lifted her carefully, carrying her up the steps and through the door with a gentleness he didn't know he had. She was quiet now, her sobs turning into soft, irregular breaths, her tears still damp on her cheeks, though her fear hadn't entirely faded. He could sense it as he laid her down on the bed, her arms instinctively clutching her knees again. RK set a tray of food beside her, quietly watching as she stayed huddled, her head still buried. He could see her trembling, shoulders tensing at every sound. Taking a steadying breath, he moved closer and softly spoke, You need to eat, just a little. But she only held herself tighter, as if the world would disappear if she just stayed hidden. After a moment, RK placed the tray aside and, moving carefully, reached out to take her hand. His fingers gently closed around hers, warming them in his steady grip. He wasn't sure if she'd pull away, but he held on just enough so she'd know he was there, unyielding yet gentle. "Look, I don't know what happened, or who did this to you," he said gently, his voice calm but determined. "But know this, I won't let anything happen to you. Not now, not ever." He paused, then added, "And I'll stay. I'm not going anywhere, I swear. No one's going to hurt you. No one's even going to look at you without your say-so." There was a shift, a pause. Slowly, her grip on her legs loosened, and for the first time, her gaze lifted. Her eyes met his, full of silent questions, and a fear so raw it almost startled him. He didn't break the connection, letting her see the resolve in his face, the unwavering care in his touch. When he gently picked up the spoon again and held it out, she hesitated. "Please," RK tried to reinforce, finally reached out, taking a bite as he continued to hold her hand, his presence steady and calming, as if trying to soothe each fragment of her pain one bit at a time. When she had eaten a few bites, RK set the tray aside and sat beside her, letting her lean into him as she drifted closer. Her sobs had quieted, her breathing evening out as she found a fragile calm in the warmth of his touch. Carefully, he pulled the blanket over her head resting on his shoulder, a constant presence. Her head sank slowly onto his lap, her face half hidden as she closed her eyes. RK watched her as she slept, each breath a small victory, each tear drying softly on her cheek. He didn't move. In that moment, all his past resentments and battles with her felt like distant memories, shadows that faded against a single unshakable truth. He would stand by her no matter what. His hand gently brushed over her hair as he whispered one last promise, his voice barely a murmur. "I don't know who hurt you, but I swear, they'll never have the chance again. Not while I'm here."